I'll be honest, the first couple minutes of this movie were so charming that it actually kind of broke my heart when I slowly realized I was going to have to take it behind the barn and shoot it.
One piece of...
I'm not going to waste a bunch of time briefing you guys because you already know the deal, and if you don't, well, you've got some catching up to do. Let's get into it. An increasingly common textbook leftist propaganda tactic is to break the fourth wall as early in their stories as possible, preferably after a charming or emotionally enticing opening sequence.
Hey, you! Get over here. A little bit closer. Oh, I know what it is. You're afraid because I'm the big bad wolf. Well, I'm not surprised. I am the villain in every story. Isn't that right, Mr. Snake? Yep.
The reason they favor this device is twofold. One, because it is so simple that it takes no additional talent, expertise, or creativity to utilize, no matter how poorly they implement it. Given the fact that these illiterate dilettantes lack all three of the former, it's not difficult to understand why they would favor this literary device. The other half of their motivation is that it blurs the boundary between the story and the audience, thus allowing for a more streamlined brainwashing process. The more successfully they can hypnotize the audience into doing the work for them, identifying with the characters, and immersing themselves into the story, the less overtly they have to force-feed their dogma. If maintaining the fourth wall keeps the characters and the audience separate, breaking the fourth wall means making a connection. They want you to feel like you're part of this cartoon world. The fourth wall is also usually broken with nonchalance and humor, which by themselves are two other ways of disarming someone who may be skeptical to the ideas with which you are trying to impregnate them. All of this results in a more seamless mindset overhaul for the underdeveloped brains, aka children, and unsuspecting adults who will be unwittingly subjected to this cultural terraforming. Make no mistake about it though, just because the main characters are animals does not make this movie any different from the usual Hollywood hit job. If anything, they'll use it as an excuse to crank the woke levels up a notch, or 10 notches. For example, leftists are so superficial and arbitrary that despite there technically being hundreds or even thousands of different variations of races, they only seem to induct a select few stereotypical pop culture ones into their victim hierarchy. Notice how each member of the bad guys team individually occupies an avatar of the left's assigned victimized groups. One American black guy, one Asian, who is also a woman, one Mexican, and one... well, that's not important. And while there is only one character of each race in the group, take note of the fact that it is the protagonist who occupies the position of the only white character in the group. Our solo white character is also the leader of their group, as well as the only character ever to break the fourth wall in this movie. All three of these seemingly insignificant details play a critical role in the subversion of the white American audience's subconscious racial hierarchy. The leader of the group being white, while the other members are not, is representative of the declining demographic dominance of the white population in the United States. We are still the leader in population, but are declining, which is hammered into the soft skulls of the audience even further when Diane Foxington goes off in her press conference.
Behind their amateurish antics and frankly unoriginal capers, really, another bank, is nothing but a deep well of anger, denial,
not true,
and self-loathing. And those are holes that no amount of cash or priceless art can ever fill.
Ringing any bells? Notice the trademark leftist condescension and gaslighting. Here's a little bonus bullshit for your trouble.
I can't believe I voted for her.
You voted for her?
What? She's good on climate change.
One thing all classic children's movies have in common are their spurts of hilarious, intermittent dialogue during serious or slightly long-winded scenes. These are of course included to keep the adolescent audience entertained, as well as to preserve the lighthearted tone of the movie. If you'll notice, however, that's almost never the case anymore in modern media. These opportunities for intermittent comedy are instead used to inject ad-libs about hot political topics like climate change, framed from the perspective of the leftists, aka communists, writing the show. Incessantly breaking the fourth wall, whether intentionally or not, is a leftist calling card, and poison like this is no different. A great example of this type of intermittent comedy being done correctly is in the movie Monsters vs. Aliens, in the beginning of the movie when they first spot the alien approaching.
Modesto, California.
Supernova, this is Red Dwarf. We actually have one. Code Nimoy. I repeat, Code Nimoy!
If that scene were written in this day and age, it might go a little more like this. Modesto, California? Aren't they strong on climate change over there? Code Nimoy! While I could go on, I think the point there was sufficiently made, so we'll return to the main topic of the movie. White audience members, whether children or adults, are going to resonate with the wolf. This is not only due to his voice actor, but as we just brought up, because he is also the only character ever to break the fourth wall. Remember when we talked about how breaking the fourth wall blurs the boundary between the story and the audience? Well, because of the words used by other characters during the story directed towards the gang, which are secretly only directed towards the wolf himself, along with the specific demographics involved in those characters, one demographic of the audience is going to experience exponentially more subliminal radioactivity than any other. So much more that they might as well be watching an entirely different movie underneath the surface.
Well, that's your opinion.
It is, and I'm the governor.
Do you think Joe Manchin is a
And
problem?
it's Joe Biden, and I'm vice president, and my name is Kamala Harris.
When the Fox mayor, or rather governor,
I'm the governor.
does her weird, over-the-top clinical diagnosis of what is overtly meant for the entire group of criminals, she is secretly only speaking to the white members of the audience. One of the two clues we can use to confirm this is the press conference event itself. The very fact that it even happened. The undeniable, uncanny valley effect caused by how jarring and odd it is that she would go into such extensive and somewhat inappropriate detail during a press conference about a group of people she's trying to pretend she doesn't care about.
But more than anything, I feel sorry for them.
Pay attention to the way she speaks in the aforementioned condescending tone often used by leftists in real life when they gaslight people. The second clue that really gives it away are the specific words she uses.
These so-called bad guys are really just second-rate has-beens. Behind their amateurish antics and frankly unoriginal capers, really, another bank, is nothing but a deep well of anger,
I ain't angry, you're angry!
denial,
Not true!
and self-loathing.
The only one I self-loathe is you.
Anger, denial, and self-loathing. Those are the exact words used by the left to gaslight and pillory any significant reignition of racial consciousness shown by whites. Keep track in the back of your mind how often you hear them parrot those same words over and over in real life. Finally, the glint in the scope that tipped me off to this sniper in the bushes. The last detail of the scene that I would have looked the other way had this not been included. When the wolf looked directly at the camera and said,
Who is she to judge us?
he doesn't mean us as in him and the gang, he means us as in him and us, the audience. Subliminally, the white audience. Who does she think she is to judge us whites? Now pay attention because this is where it gets really juicy. By subliminally triggering this pent-up irritation to varying degrees within white members of the audience, the propagandists get to gaslight them through the Fox woman while simultaneously allowing them to vicariously indulge this feeling through the protagonist wolf. Almost like the wolf is their telepathic confidant. Consequently, those who are caught in this trap have subconsciously walked themselves into a cathartic and more agreeable frame of mind due to the underlying emotional relief they feel. Even the emotions themselves that the authors are tapping into are not one-sided. This lends itself to the direction in which they plan to take the plot. There are a few different types of trapped emotions in this bouquet of repressed rage. One of them is the irritation with being blamed incessantly for all of the world's problems.
You're afraid because I'm the big bad wolf. Well, I'm not surprised. I am the villain in every story.
Another subtle shade of repressed irritation might be not getting taken seriously.
More than anything, I feel sorry for them.
Listen specifically to the words the wolf uses to introduce himself in the beginning.
You're afraid because I'm the big bad wolf.
The big bad wolf simultaneously serves as a metaphor. The left's communistic agenda only works if they maintain their status as the arbiters of virtue and victimhood. In order to do this, they gaslight the very same groups of people they relentlessly attack. Remember how in our Cuckolds Incorporated breakdown, they pretended that those on the right were the ones canceling people for old tweets? That's only a small example, but it proves our point nonetheless. No matter how evil one side pretends the other is, the subconscious pendulum in everyone's mind inevitably swings the other direction when pushed for long enough. If they don't gaslight the dissenters at every turn, the gig is up. The wolf's fourth wall breaking narration of his awareness that he's the bad guy in every story is the woke writer's way of mocking and gaslighting the white people in real life who are also aware that whites are incessantly made into villains. Everything said by or about the wolf from this point forward are simultaneously in reference to or as a representative of whites in real life. Every time he breaks the fourth wall, he is talking to the white people in the audience. He is the wolf in sheep's clothing. Or the sheep in wolf's clothing. The white person in wolf's clothing. The white wolf in sheep's clothing? Anyways, he's a puppet. This is done intentionally as the first half of a larger game plan. Pay attention as the plot begins to shift after a certain tipping point in the story, and the white audience members are obliviously corralled into the slaughterhouse. I'm not quite done with this point though, because I need all of you watching to understand just how powerful of an effect these first 15 minutes alone have over the audience. The strategy they are employing is expertly executed because it does not require them to deploy both long-term tactics simultaneously. It grants them more flexibility to weave in as many other threads of propaganda as they can in between each phase of their two-part playbook procedure. It allows them to maneuver the audience's attention in such a way that the authors can have their cake and eat it too. They can permit the white audience to subconsciously indulge in this repressed rage, which, once established, passively progresses their agenda. Meanwhile, on the surface, the writers themselves can still indulge in their own desires to mock and gaslight the white male audience completely unbeknownst to them. All of this only assists their agenda for the latter half of the plot when the bad guys, or more specifically, the bad guys, aka the white people, go good. This going good is framed from the leftist perspective though, in order to train white people to know how to behave in the way their slave masters would prefer. Our communist writers are providing the criteria for virtuousness for the new generation of white children. This aligns exactly with what the left incessantly pushes in their own narrative. This is what they want to implant within the minds of white people. And if you think that sounds goofy, that's because it fucking is. It is so comically desperate that unless we had been bombarded by the events of the past few years, nobody in their right mind would even consider what I'm saying. And neither would I really. At this point, however, we all know better. And if you don't, you've been living under a rock. Little side note, the wolf is not only white, he's played by the same corny white proxy antagonist of Iron Man 2, which is, coincidentally, another movie we dissected. Notice as well how every leadership position except for the wolf villain is occupied by a woman, even the chief of police. Or rather, chiefess? Although I wouldn't be surprised if this she in particular is secretly a he, because just look at that build. Just as well though for the communist writers constructing this house of horrors, as the transgender unisex narrative is just as much a part of their directive as anything else. Foxington, the mayor, or rather governor,
I'm the governor,
is also voiced by a black woman, just like how the mayor of Gotham City in the newest Batman movie was too. I didn't dissect the Batman movie because its narrative's structural integrity hadn't collapsed under the weight of the annoying but thankfully lacking woke injections. There was more than enough to talk about though.
Listen to me. If we don't stand up for Annika, no one will. All anyone cares about in this place are these white, privileged assholes. The mayor, the commissioner, the DA.
Just don't make any moves without me, understand? It's no more dangerous than you know.
Speaking of the press conference, what the fuck is this press conference? Even if we were to ignore the obvious anti-white agenda at work here, It would have taken the most chronically online, socially underdeveloped SJW internet psychologists for Foxington's dialogue to have turned out so utterly clunky. No actual narrative points were given to indicate that the bad guys were angry, that their group was on the decline, or anything else she said. The narrative points that were given were that they've always been treated like the bad guy, had come to terms with it, and now happily occupied that position with each other.
What's up, Papa? But these are the cards we've been dealt, so we might as well play them.
Another layer of propaganda outside of the subliminal racial angles we brought to light is the obvious allusion to real-life criminals that the left is making. Criminals aren't bad people, they just need a chance to rescue a cat out of a tree, and then they'll realize just how good it feels to be good little comrades. What's even funnier is that the leftist writers are so stupid that they think because they've written the wolf and his gang to take it personally, this somehow implies that the Fox mayor is correct about them when she's not. As if I even needed to mention it, just so you're aware, all the time they spend belittling the gang simultaneously and subliminally belittles white people in real life. Notice the mayor's ever-present, almost autistic, unfazed tonality and expression when interacting with the wolf. Not only that, but is also constantly biting back with snarky remarks. The clip is too long to show without getting a copyright strike, but you can easily figure it out yourself when the overwhelming sense of uncanny valley wrenches your gut so hard that you'll want to puke. Nobody that high status would be that snarky right off the bat unless they had already known each other and had beef with each other. None of it makes a lick of sense unless you take into account the hidden conversation that we've already uncovered. That the animosity with which this proxy character is charged is actually directed towards white people in real life. And because it's already been subliminally implanted within the minds of the white audience members that they are the same as the wolf, anything said to or about the wolf are received personally by the white audience members. What bothers me most about all of this is that even the writers know that what they are doing is wrong. Do me a favor and watch the trailer for this movie on YouTube, paying attention specifically to how little of the scenes we have broken down that they show off. If they were so convinced that the brainwashing they amateurishly weaved into the story had any moral grounding, or at the very least entertainment value, why wouldn't that be the first thing they plaster all over the trailer? You can see many points during the trailer where they show pieces of the scenes that we have gone over, and will go over, only they cut it off right before showing the instance that ruins it. For example, in the trailer, they show the wolf and the Fox mayor taking a selfie, but only the first half second where they look happy before she backbites him.
May I can't miss a photo op with the governor and a pile of garbage.
Oh, Mr. Poodleton, you're too hard on yourself.
Hey.
This gynocentric style of writing, in which the female characters act like condescending, unaffected robots, is becoming more and more prevalent in Western media as a way of brainwashing men into believing that in order to win a woman's validation, you have to align with whatever surface-level opinions she pretends to have. The men who already buy into this are the exact kind whose wives' boyfriends tell them when to go to bed every night. Then, because women are such gullible cattle as long as anything is wrapped in a blanket of victimhood, all they have to do is brainwash women into turning away from their men as leaders and turning instead towards the media. Whatever is virtue signaled in the media is what women will say they value, and because new generations of men were never taught how to properly seduce women or ground themselves in their own truth, they end up brainwashing themselves as a mating strategy. It ruins the natural system of checks and balances, weighing the scale in favor of female dominance. And no, that's not a good thing, you fucking porn addicts. A significant part of men's motivations and behavior is rooted in their mating strategy. If the mating strategy is reduced to bending over backwards for a bipolar, medicated cum dump of a wife whose mind has been passed around by the media like a small third world child on Little St. James Island, that's bad news bears for the culture at large. Men inherently strive to attract the divine feminine. However, the feminist movement that has been lying to generations of women and the general public for over a century now has tricked even men themselves into thinking that the only thing men are interested in is mindless jizzing. Men are willing to put themselves in mortal danger for their women because they project the divine feminine onto her. It's why a man will put up with infinitely more abuse than a woman in a relationship. It's also why most of the time, men won't even register female abuse as abuse, because that's how deep this psychological phenomenon runs. The eternal running joke that women don't fart or smell bad or do any other gross but natural things is also part of that phenomenon. By eliminating the natural checks and balances and tipping the scale towards female dominance, this passively corrals the porn-addicted men raised by single mothers and schooled by bitter, boy-hating feminists into subconscious servitude. The drive for sex in men has been found to be even stronger than our drive for food.
That's not nothing. That's something. That likely does something to you.
You're a fool if you don't think one of the Rockefellers got a whiff of that and didn't take it into account when drafting their plans for global enslavement. All of this is the feminist, aka communist way of transitioning the West from a Christian way of life, connected to their own divine nature and in tune with the source, to a barren wasteland of intellectualism. The worship of the intellectual mind, which is satanic in nature. On account of women being significantly more agreeable and group-oriented than men on average, an intellectually centered, bureaucratic culture has been integrated into the subconscious minds of Western women. Those in power take advantage of this biological characteristic in women, distancing them from their natural inclination towards submission for their man and mate, channeling it instead towards a satanic, algorithmic way of thinking that filters out men not pre-approved by the state directive. Little side note, that's also why the vast majority of doctors try their damnedest to get women on birth control as early as possible. It suppresses their natural hormonal cycles so much so that it even affects the type of men they are attracted to. Not nearly as much as some people claim, but enough to make a significant difference. Now, where were we?
This is going surprisingly smoothly.
Did you guys hear that? They must have hired a goddamn magician to write this script. That's textbook misdirection right there. Slipping in yet another climate change nugget, quite literally in the background, for our ears to hear while our eyes are focused on the actions of the main characters. Our conscious attention is intensely focused on the nerve-wracking scene of them almost falling off the snake and trying to stay quiet, while our minds, aka our defenses, are distracted and down. Their climate propaganda can walk right through the front door with you none the wiser. After the curtain rises, the golden dolphin is discovered to have been stolen. Only our good little virtue signaling biracial guinea pig has something to say about it.
I didn't bring Hope back to the city for an award. I did these good things because of how they made me feel. That tingly feeling I get, that shiver up my spine, the wag in my tiny tail. Because you see, being good just feels so good. And when you're good, you're loved.
He's saying to the wolf, and as we discussed, secretly to white people in real life, that you certainly won't be rewarded for following our guidelines, but we'll call you an ally. You get to be socially validated by following our communist guidelines of virtuousness.
Denial.
Sure, that too.
Narcissism.
Yeah.
Emotional emptiness.
So we're on the same page.
Excuse me, narcissism? Emotional emptiness. That's all her. Yeah, the bad guys have a jubilant way of going about their villainy, but that's certainly not narcissism. This bitch, on the other hand, is the very definition of narcissistic, deflecting every exchange of dialogue in a subtly pretentious and underhanded way, never giving up the frame. Now granted, none of these characters hold the slightest ounce of authenticity anyway, but if we were to entertain this, the writers would still be absolute morons. By the way, another leftist calling card is the use, or rather misuse, of trending psychological terms and topics such as narcissism. No one could possibly be more narcissistic than the people who support the disintegration of specifically targeted nations, cultures, and races, and the obliteration of the world population and enslavement of millions of others over a climate scapegoat like carbon. A group of people who pedestalize not so renewable energy alternatives for no other reason than because they've never once in their lives doubted their own virtuousness. Hypocritical isn't even an appropriate word at this point. Evil is. As a matter of fact, they're so stupid that they can't even keep their story straight.
Professor Marmalade! No, don't you see what he's doing? He's playing you.
But it was my idea.
It was his idea.
Only because you made him have it.
Of course you didn't do it. How could you? After all, you're such a good boy.
You're such a good boy.
That shiver up my spine, the wag in my tiny tail.
Arrest them!
But you set us up.
Oh, pish. Let's be honest. Evolution set you up. But Wolfie here really clinched it. You fell for every one of my traps. Starting with saving a helpless little old lady.
You little pouchy cheeks. I'll kill you. Get down. Get down.
The big bad wolf is attacking me.
This pompous guinea pig is the leftist representative of the movie, propagating as well their sentiment towards white people. Part of the way they gaslight the audience is by pretending the matter has already been decided and that they are only humoring a discussion about it as a way of giving the eternal enemy a second chance for their own amusement up on their high horse. Speaking of their inability to keep their story straight, why does Madam Governor keep talking as if she's the mayor of the city even though she's supposedly the governor, which would be of the state?
Professor, I'm not about to put the safety of the city on the line for an experiment.
There is a distinct difference between those titles, but I guess I wouldn't expect any different from a group of people only interested in enhancing the optics of their proxy characters. Now, this is the point at which they diverge from what we might recognize as propaganda, but this does not detract from the initial seeds they planted earlier in the movie. Remember, their strategy works so well because it is passive. Now, they don't have to repeatedly hammer it into the soft skulls of the audience because the seeds grow on their own. One thing that's always interesting to find out is whether they decide to go balls to the wall with their propaganda or decide to switch it up part of the way through. Although their tactics cross over from movie to movie, no two pieces are the same. While the wolf turns a new corner by acting good, their overt methods of demonstrating this in the movie are very kid-friendly and oddly inconspicuous considering just how blatantly saturated that first chunk of the movie was. Nonetheless, more remains to be seen, and again, the seeds have already been planted. While I was looking up the demographics of the cast, I accidentally found out, before getting to her part in the movie, that Diane Foxington is one of the criminals that the bad guys mentioned earlier in the movie, the Crimson Paw. I'm guessing that at some point in the movie she's gonna out-criminal the bad guys and... What's that? She does? Ugh.
Wait a sec, you're the Crimson Paw?
The Queen of Cons, acrobatic Swiss Army knife, stole the Zimpango diamond twice, once for profit, second time just for fun. Never identified, never caught.
Guess I'm still the best bad guy the world has ever seen.
I knew something wasn't right, so I did some investigating, and that meteor...
I know. Some kind of cosmic mega super anything.
Right! If conducted through an array of ionized crystals, it will generate a massive psychokinetic field the size of a city. Oh my gosh, did I interrupt you? Were you going to say that?
I was going to be a little more technical, but you got the gist of it.
Standard woke procedure, white man gives the dumb answer, black woman gives the technical answer, and assumes everyone else is just as super smart as her.
All I saw in the end was the tricky fox that they always told me I was.
Who said you were a tricky fox? Because just a few minutes ago, the authors were busy waving their puppet strings around, telling us you were never identified. If they knew she was a crimson fox, then as the only crimson fox in the entire movie, where 99% of the population are humans, not even other animals, one would have to wonder why nobody ever suspected, much less investigated her. Especially when she ran for mayor, governor. But that's not all.
I didn't just go after it. I had it. And a clear escape route.
Because I never make mistakes and nothing ever goes wrong for me because I'm so perfect. Except for when I'm not, because the authors still have to pretend that I'm a real character. See how they make sure to prop her up on this magnificent pedestal, and no matter which corner the story turns or what struggles the protagonist is going through, not only has she also been through it, but been through it even better than them. She didn't quit her thievery because she was forced to, like the main cast of characters. She did it out of the absolute perfection of her own heart, even though she had a clear escape route. Everyone automatically loves her, no matter what, and none of the established rules of the plot apply to her and her alone. This is what's called a Mary Sue. Not only was she also a villain, she was the best villain, and as it turns out, still is the best villain.
Nope, I'm still the best.
She ran and got elected for governor.
And I'm the governor.
See if we can't hack into the government surveillance satellite.
But you're the governor. Couldn't you just ask?
Yeah, but the paperwork.
That's why you're governor.
But is also still so perfect and virtuous that the authors have to completely invalidate the fucking protagonist Wolf, whose character arc they keep pretending to care about, by putting Mary Sue back into the spotlight as quickly as possible.
So now, instead of hurting people, I'm helping them. I'm still me. I'm just me on the right side.
You stole my car?
Respect.
We need some kind of magnetized cross-circuit interceptor?
You mean this?
Oh, she just keeps getting cooler. Oh, yeah.
And when she's finally given an overt chance to confess to being a master thief herself, she is absolved of any and all responsibility by the wolf. Just remember, everyone, a woman can do anything a man can, except be held to the same level of accountability for her actions.
Well, as a matter of fact, it's time I came clean about something. The truth is, I'm really
Really a big fan of redemption arcs. Yeah, we know.
This is supposed to be some sort of redemption moment for all the other stuff they did steal, yet mere seconds ago, we just saw the person the writers made sure to remind us was the best thief in the world just get let off scot-free by the same people who supposedly believe in justice now. Alright, let's check out these credentials. What? No way. The tarantula's actress's name is Aquafina?